Hello everyone and welcome to episode 15 of SSTO Space Program. Today we will focus on supplies and logistics and talk a little bit about our upcoming Duna colonization mission. There are a couple of issues that we need to discuss, but first, let's go back to Artemis, which is currently landed on Duna's surface. Most of you suggested that we should freeze our crew and let them wait for the colony ship to arrive, and this is precisely what I did. We have enough resources to freeze them this last time, and now they can safely wait for the colony ship to arrive. In worst case scenario, the onboard probe can fly Artemis back to Kerbal safely. Next, we need to find a way to resupply and refuel our space station, most notably Kerbal Cargo Terminal, which is also a refueling station for our space freighters. For this, I made this unmanned tanker SSTO, and while it is way too small to refuel the station in one go, it is relatively low on part count and easy to fly, while being full stock apart from the fuel tanks obviously. We will also use a mod called Routine Mission Manager to help us deal with multiple refueling missions, because what this mod does is allow you to fly resupplying missions in the background. All you need to do is fly the mission once, track it via the mod interface, and next time you should be able to do it automatically. In our case, we will be flying this tanker SSTO to resupply Kerbal Cargo Terminal with liquid fuel and oxidizer. I chose one of MKS fuel tanks simply because they can be easily refitted for other goods, allowing us to deliver different types of fuel with exactly the same vessel. A fully stocked version of this craft is available for you in the description, and should be able to deliver around 100 tons of fuel into low carbon orbit. As you can see, this vessel is relatively well suited for this purpose, and we not only reached orbit easily following a really simple ascent profile, but we also have quite a lot of excess fuel for orbital maneuvers. To maneuver in orbit, we have 4 nuclear engines and an array of RCS thrusters, so docking with the station should be easy. After a small correction burn, we reached the station easily and docked to the central docking port in the freighter bay. As you can see, the fuel tank on the vessel is much smaller than the one on the station, actually 7.5 times smaller, so we will need multiple launches to fill it to the brim. Once we docked, mission tracking ended automatically and we could transfer the fuel over to the station. The mod allows tracking a return mission as well, so this is what I wanted to try to figure out. The rules are pretty similar. Transfer the stuff you want to bring back to your vessel, start tracking, undock and fly the mission once. It was a maiden re-entry for this SSTO, but it worked pretty well, and we even had some extra fuel for flying in the atmosphere. The vessel was pretty stable and flies well, so no surprises there. Once we landed, tracking ended automatically again, and both resupply and return missions should be properly recorded now. Now, to order a resupply mission, all you need to do is go to the station, name or register a docking port and select a mission via the mod interface. Here we have just one recorded mission, so it's easy to choose. By default, your mission will be launched after 1 day of preparation. This didn't work for me due to a bug or a conflict I have with another mod, and I'm working for a solution to this problem, because I really like this idea. And I like the idea behind the mod, and it actually makes resupplying so much easier. So once I get it to work, I'm pretty sure I'll use it very often. Meanwhile, on Duna, our robotic rover has reached another biome, namely Midlands, and we were ready to gather all the readings from that location and send the data over to the research station in Duna's orbit for processing. This way, we will get much more science than we would if we transferred the data directly to KSP. I took a second set of readings as well and stored it for future recovery in the experiment storage unit. Once this was done, our rover was set for its next destination, the Highlands. Once the data processing on the station is done, we will have enough science to unlock the entire tech tree, I think. Right now, there are just 4 or 5 last nodes to unlock, and we should get 2500 science points in just a couple of days. But we have quite a lot of unassigned data too, meaning we can get even more science later on. Now, this brings me to the next topic, which is colonization of Duna and how we want to approach it. First, let me show you what I have prepared so far. The ship you see right now is our potential Duna colony ship that will carry all the supplies and equipment to set up a large colony. It has 7 scaled nuclear engines, mainly to save part count, that is already quite large. Initially, I wanted to use nuclear motors that run on liquid hydrogen provided by one of rover dude mods, but they put off insane amount of heat. So much so that with 3 engines only, I ran out of space for large radiators on the vessel after placing like 16 or 20, and yet the engines were still exploding due to overheating. So I think something is quite not balanced there. Also, liquid hydrogen takes up much more space than liquid fuel does, and vessels tend to have more fuel tanks to have comparable delta V, which in turn makes them bigger and require more part counts. On the sides you see 4 automated mining stations that were inspired by forward stations from Mass Effect Andromeda. I won't lie to you about that. MKS allows for completely automated mining stations that can store resources using Planetary Logistics system, and each station is dedicated to one resource only and can land on its own and is nuclear powered, so we don't have to worry about the power supply. On top of the ship we have packed multiple base modules, and as you can see there are 6 of those currently, so the base we are going to set is quite large. To construct it on Duna's surface we need almost 2 huge containers worth of material kits, which is equivalent to about 400 tons. Underneath that there are some auxiliary fuel storage tanks for other vessels like shuttles and sky cranes. Next are living quarters for our colonists with all required life support modules, so habitats, greenhouses, recyclers and a training academy to level up our crew without returning it to KSP. We can bring probably a dozen of Kerbals for a one-way trip to Duna on the ship, especially if they are going to move to a nice base afterwards, so we don't need to worry about too much living space. In front of the hub area we have docking section where all the shuttles and utility vehicles will be docked. So yes, as you can see the ship is rather on the larger side. In fact, it is much bigger than any of the space freighters we have launched so far. When empty it weighs a bit over 1,500 tons and over 5,600 tons when full, plus about 800 tons in shuttles and vehicles that we're going to bring along. I think it looks quite nice personally, but I would love to hear your opinion about it. So, about the forward/mining station. It is fully automated, has an MKS logistics module to allow push operations into Planetary Logistics system, and is equipped with engines and landing gear to land on Duna, or any comparable body for that matter, on its own. Each station is dedicated to one resource type, and eventually I would like to place one for every available resource. I made a fully stock variant as well, if you're interested. Then we have the Sky Crane, which will be used to land DIY containers on Duna's surface, and since some of them are quite heavy, the Sky Crane isn't small either. It was designed to land anything that won't fit into Mark III cargo bay, and can land on Duna's surface any payload that is a bit over 40 tons, and then get back to orbit on its own. It's full stock too. It has 4 vector engines, giving it 4 meganewtons of thrust, and is unmanned. For smaller but equally heavy payloads we have this orbital shuttle. It can put 40 ton of payload on the surface, is capable of vertical landing and takeoff, and can glide relatively well in Duna's atmosphere. Its primary function will be delivering material kits needed for the base construction. Once DIY kits and enough material kits are available on the surface, we will use this mobile workshop to construct each base section. It can land on Duna on its own too, is designed to house a couple of engineers long enough to build 1 or 2 smaller habitats first. It also has a cargo bay with a tiny Akita rover for moving small stuff around. The last component is a mining rover that we'll use to refuel our shuttles and Sky Crane initially. It is also equipped with a number of winches to bring DIY kits and larger cargo crates to the construction site, if for whatever reason it wasn't landed in the vicinity. This vehicle can also land on its own, thanks to Honey Badger VTOL engine, has 2 drills and an ISRU to produce fuel on the surface, and is nuclear powered, so it operates all the time. It also has a probe core installed, so can operate without any crew. So now, our colony ship, when packed, fits into this DIY container and weighs 766 tons. As you can see, it's quite large nevertheless, but still, it's a big ship, so I guess it's not surprising. Now, we also had a rescue mission to do, because yet another unfortunate Kerbal was stranded in Kerbin's orbit, And it was a very good excuse to show you one of my early SSTOs, designed specifically for low orbits. It's a really cool plane, very pleasant to fly, takes off like a dream and has abundant fuel and monopropellant, so be sure to check it out. I like flying it very much. Okay, but I see the capsule is getting close, so time to take off. I won't be boring you with the mission profile, because you've seen it many times already, but I left the footage almost uncut for those of you who would like to see how such missions are done or how I do it. The flight profile for this vessel, anyway, is super easy. Right, so where were we? Oh yes, Duna colony ship. Okay, so you see, the problem is, or actually, I don't even know where to start. Let me start this way. I do read all of your comments, even if I do not answer to all of them. And under our last video, when I asked you whether you would like to focus more on colonization of Duna or building stuff in the vicinity of Kerbal on Man and Minmus, it looks like we are equally split up on that. So I thought, as someone suggested in the comments as well, why we cannot combine those two things and actually build up the infrastructure around or on Man and Minmus, and construct our colony ship there, launch it from Minmus, for example, and continue onwards to Duna. And you see, the problem with this ship is that it's bigger than anything else that we've launched so far, and while ground construction allows building stuff off-world, with MKS it is not really that much easier, because the DIY container for the ship is already very large, so it's awkward to launch, and it's very heavy, so almost 800 tons. So yeah, so it's beyond capabilities of any of our SSTO space planes. And then, to make things even worse, building this ship on another body's surface requires also a lot of material kits. Actually, over 1000 tons of material kits we'll need to launch, I think almost 6 largest containers full of material kits. Well, in the base version of ground construction, you build stuff, I think, using metals or something like that, which is probably a resource introduced by the mob that should be normally by design available on site, so you could probably mine it on site. The problem with MKS is that material kits is the very high-end good that cannot be easily manufactured on site unless you have like a full production chain, and we don't have that. And developing a base that would be able to produce a lot of material kits on its own will take a lot of time, and I don't think that that is actually worth it. So yeah, so actually launching this ship, and I mean building this ship off-world, still requires launching almost an equal weight of its dry mass into orbit and then onto Minmus. And then the problem is that the ship, once it's ready, it will be unfueled and it will carry no resources. So everything else that we want to carry over to Duna will have to be sort of like launched to either to Minmus or to Minmus orbit. The ship would need to be refueled and so on and so on. So I actually don't see how this is easier. That's one thing. Also, the problem with launching this kind of massive vessels is that the ship already is relatively high on part count. It is a bit less than 300 parts without all the shuttles and construction vehicles and so on. So yes, I could technically launch it using stock launch vehicles, and as you saw probably, and it can be done. It's not difficult. It might look like it is kind of challenging, but it really isn't. I mean, you can do it once to prove the point, and I feel like I've proven the point already. There were launches that were 1000 ton heavy, and this ship could be easily split into 3 or 4 pieces that would weigh way less than 1000 ton, and then we could launch another 1000 ton like a tanker and refuel it. I mean, it's all possible. It would just be probably boring to watch, and it would be a chore, really. I don't see how this is cool. Also, to launch that heavy payload using stock KSP launch vehicles, so the thing that I was trying to do up to now, will actually make it even harder to play with, because that will skyrocket the part count for the launch vehicle, and the payload already is really difficult to maintain. So we would be looking at something that is 500 parts, and those kind of vessels tend to have maximum 8 FPS for me, so it's not very entertaining. Also, the problem I see is that this endeavor, the whole endeavor of building this big colony ship and then building this big, infrastructure, as you can see, the infrastructure is already I mean, it's not in place, but it's designed. So we already have everything planned for this massive construction on the surface of Duna. But yeah, first thing is that I don't really see the point of launching it using stock launch vehicles. I mean, the point has been proven that this kind of massive payload can be put in orbit. Just don't have to see, I don't see why we should make it more difficult for us by using only stock SSTO launch vehicles. Also, the problem, well, this is the second problem I see, is that it is quite time consuming to build these big structures and ships. And there are two problems I see with that. First is that this series seems to be declining in popularity, and whether this is because you had enough of my cringy voice, or you don't like the direction this series is taking, or maybe it's because YouTube is changing, because YouTube is changing actually, and my channel has been finally hit by it. I will probably never know, unless you tell me that you don't like what we're doing here. And the second thing is that with the declining popularity, I kind of don't see the point of spending 35 hours on each episode, because this is about the time investment I have to put in every single video. There's also another thing, kind of like recently this series is no longer an SSTO Space Program, I would say. It's kind of like a putting massive ships space program. And I'm not sure if I like it. I mean, I enjoyed quite a lot, as probably a lot of you watching this, Ryan's Super Colonization series. And I never really wanted to replicate that directly. And my initial plan was that we would go about exploring the Kerbal system using SSTOs, because SSTOs for me are a bit more difficult to fly and basically design than standard rockets are in KSP. And I find them a little bit more challenging, and therefore I like the challenge, so I thought it would be a cool idea. And by adding colonization, I was thinking that, yeah, we can also set up a relatively comparable bases, or I would say bases that are compatible with SSTO kind of payload capabilities, and you know, with life support and such, it would be even a little bit more challenging than normally. And right now it's kind of like we're at the point where the launches that we have are no longer compatible with SSTOs. It's actually very difficult to justify use of SSTOs, because look at what's been happening lately. Everything that we've launched was so big that the only viable option to launch it was either really big rocket that happened to be an SSTO rocket, or this oversized OCOD-2 vehicle that can put 440 tons of payload into low Kerbal orbit, and that's it. And we've been just basically making huge SSTO launch vehicles to put stuff into Kerbal's orbit, and then, well, the spaceship would depart from that. It's not entirely the intended direction for the series, but if you enjoy it more than just, you know, simple SSTO missions to other planets, that's fine by me too. It's just that I think that if we want to continue colonization on that scale, we have to stop using SSTO launch vehicles and start using either modded engines or tweak scale to actually make the game playable and allow me to record stuff in a relatively well-controlled manner. And you know, it will probably still carry the same name as SSTO Space Program, but it will be less about SSTOs and more about actually building massive ships and massive colonies. Well, I think the danger in this is that would become probably relatively similar to Super Colonization series, and even less relatable to an average player than it is right now. Another solution is that we kind of scale down on the payloads and start using standard, or maybe even bigger, like relatively big Mark III SSTOs, and build bases that can actually fit inside, so bases that can fit inside the cargo bay, and kind of put more pressure on launching SSTOs. I don't know, it's up to you to decide, not me. What do you want to see? Actually, this is the big question. What do you want to see in the series? Whether do you want to see big bases built, you know, on a couple of planets probably, or whether do you want to see cool looking SSTOs exploring, you know, different locations? Or maybe you want to see a little bit of both, because, well, we need to kind of tune it down. I mean, I don't know how to explain this properly. I suppose it's clear already, but just take a look at the dual colony ship that we sent. I think it was already pretty big, okay? It was like 600-700 tons of a ship. with every component added to it. It was 700 tons and it was big, was considered big, right? It was still a huge ship if you think about that in standard KSP terms. This one will be almost 6,000 tons. It's cool. So I obviously tested the ship before and I used HyperEdit to put it in orbit and actually see if everything is working as expected and working properly and stuff. So yeah, it's cool. I mean, the ship itself is over 200 parts, so works pretty well, and it's relatively, and the game handles it really well as well. So it's nice, it's pretty, it's large. It feels like out of a different game actually, or I would say Elite Dangerous or maybe Free Space. It's not Kerbal Space Program anymore in a sense, but the problem is that Kerbal Space Program wasn't really designed with such massive creations in mind. And even if with mods like MKS and, you know, life support and stuff, those ships actually are justified in a sense. Still, the game mechanics and the amount of parts and how the game treats multiple large vessels and vessels that have large amount of modules and parts in them is not exactly optimized, and this is kind of putting some restrictions. Yeah, the bottom line, what I'm trying to see is that we need to find a way to kind of make this series a little bit more manageable time-wise for me, and we can do that either by ditching completely stock launch vehicles and go into modded or tweak scaled launch vehicles and you know, kind of focus more on the colonization aspect of the series, or we can scale down the bases, not abandon them completely, but just scale them down so they can fit into standard SSTOs, and you know, go about exploring and setting bases using standard SSTOs. Also, with the recent YouTube changes, it would be best if I put 3 videos a week, but obviously I'm not able to do that if every video takes me 25 to 35 hours, because I also have a job and a family to take care of. So what is probably going to happen is that instead of squeezing the content from 25-30 minutes long to 18, as I'm doing currently, I will just make 2 10 to 12 minute video that will have more or less the same amount of content as you see right now, and probably another video that might not be related to KSP at all. So yes, please tell me what you think, because as much as I enjoy playing KSP and as much as I love making videos for you, I just need to find the right way to, you know, make awesome videos for you that you will enjoy and also that will be manageable for me to make. Okay, I won't be boring you anymore. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed at least part of the video, and as I said, your feedback and your input is very much appreciated and is very much needed. Thank you very much. My name is Mark Thrimm, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.